Hola, it's Joe Pardavila, and this is the Forbes Books Podcast. If you run a B2B or even a B2C, you've probably dipped your toe into marketing automation. And this week's guest became one of the pioneers of digital marketing when she purchased her first marketing automation system in 2004. As a point of reference, that's 2 years before Twitter was founded. Then in 2007, she moved from practitioner to trusted advisor for marketing leaders when she became a partner of the Pedowitz Group. Her name is Dr. Debbie Qaqish. Debbie, how are you today?
Hey, Joe, I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent, and I had the pleasure of speaking to your partner, Jeff Pedowitz, the other day, and I wanted to get you on the podcast because he was the one who told me that you coined the phrase revenue marketing, which I thought was already a thing, but apparently you coined it in 2011. So
That's absolutely right. We were working in an industry where the technology for marketers was just emerging. And we began to see a big change in marketers going from being just that pens and mugs department or the make it pretty department to all of a sudden they had this technology that could connect with customers. And because of that, it put marketing in a position where they could actually have some credible impact on revenue. So we began using that phrase revenue marketing in 2011. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. When we started using the phrase, we would get one of two looks from people. The first look would be, have you just grown a second head and are you speaking Sanskrit? Because I know not of which you speak. But the second person would look at us and say, revenue marketing, that is really interesting. Tell me more. And so we saw that change in the market in 2010, 2011. And so we have been using that phrase ever since.
All right, let's do this, Debbie. You and I are trapped on an elevator. We hit the alarm. The fire department says they'll be there in 30 minutes, so we're going to hang out for a little while. And I tell you, hey, I'm a hand model. I've been hand modeling for years. And I'll say, Debbie, what do you do? What do you do for a living? And then you tell me about revenue marketing. And then at that point, me being the hand model, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So if you were trapped in an elevator with a hand model, how would you describe what revenue marketing is?
Okay. How much time do you spend on your cell phone?
The better question is, how much time do I not spend on my cell phones?
Exactly. And so you're surfing the net, you're taking a look at different websites, you are going to different parts of websites to explore things that interest you. We call it digital body language. And because marketing has the technology that can see, Joe, where you are and what you're doing online, we can surmise from that areas of interest. Have you ever been on Amazon, maybe looking at buying a purse for your wife, for example, and you say, well, I'm not going to do that. And then you go away. And then all of a sudden, these ads start popping up and it's following you around. Don't you want to buy this purse? Don't you want to buy this purse? Don't you want to buy this purse? So what's happened is our whole world is now online. And everything that you do online can be tracked. And we can see that digital body language and decide how we want to respond to that. So this has been a big thing in the B2C world, and the B2B world, it's also become a very big thing. So for example, if I'm selling to Microsoft, for example, big company, right? And let's say, for example, I'm talking to Microsoft about maybe buying one of the services that we have. And all of a sudden, I get a ping on my phone through my tracking software that says, you know, Microsoft's been all over your website, Debbie, and they really went to the area that talks about how you create customer journeys for organizations. And 5 different people from Microsoft have been all over that website. Debbie, you may want to call them back and see what's going on, what their area of interest is. So it's the notion of digital body language and what you can surmise from that and what next actions you can take. Does that help, Joe?
Yeah, that's very good. And we still have plenty of time to chat about life and what we've learned over the course of our lives because the fire department hasn't arrived here.
Exactly.
But do me a favor, Debbie, don't let my wife know that I'm shopping for purses on Amazon.com. She would not. She would not like that concept. She would prefer I go to a Louis Vuitton or a Burberry. So please don't.
But you could even have your own website, Joe, for hand models.
Okay.
Right?
Yes,
and
true.
then if somebody comes to your website and is looking at your, the kinds of jobs that you've done as a hand model, And then you can call them and say, hey, saw you're on my website. Yeah, you're looking for a hand model?
Thank you for educating me on that. But one thing I do know is that a lot of tech companies are now adding protections for consumers, whether it's browsers that block cookies or even phones like the iPhone is doing this to block, social media companies from accessing your information. How is the future of that affecting what you do?
I call this is a journey. I call it follow the bouncing customer. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Number one, there's always going to be a way that technology is going to follow what you are doing. It's just going to be a matter of where you are and how they follow you. So if you think about days prior to the internet, and I don't know if you're quite old enough to do that, but I literally remember the first website that I built for a company. I was the VP of sales and marketing, and I'm talking to my sales organization about we're going to have this website and our customers can come and get all this information about us. And they're like, oh my God, well, what do we do? I mean, all our information is going to be there. I'm like, that's right. So you really have to up your game. And so selling became different then, right? We had a different response to that. So if you follow where customers go just to your website, and now they're browsing on, it might be TikTok, they might be on LinkedIn, they might be on Facebook, they might be on any of these areas, not just surfing the net. The technology is just getting more and more sophisticated every day. And the protections are a lot around definitely trying to protect consumer privacy, but also, not being able to reach out to you cold, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't just send you an email, right? If we were in the UK, for example, I just couldn't out of the blue say, hey, Joe, I see you're a hand model, and don't you want to buy some of our cream for keep your hands looking great?
Right.
I would not be able to do that. However, if I had an ad on LinkedIn while you were there and you happened to press that button for that ad, then you and I could interact. So, if you take a look at the rise of technology just for B2B marketers alone, I bought my first marketing automation system in 2004. I was customer number 12 for Eloqua, which has been one of the big players in the marketing automation space. And there were maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 different pieces of technology. Marketers now have a choice of over 8,000
Wow.
different pieces of technology. So it's gotten very, very complex and it's gotten very, very sophisticated. And there's always going to be a way to connect digitally because the technology's there. But we're finding, especially post pandemic, that customers want more and more digital touch points versus live touch points.
Hmm.
And even in the B2B world, they want, more self-service. They want a B2C experience in a B2B world. You're just going to have to change the way you think about things. And, that change could happen every 6 months, but the technology is there for that digital relationship to happen.
Awesome. And maybe you can answer this question. Why is Europe more aggressive when it comes to changing terms of services for tech companies? And then all of a sudden, we all follow suit over here. Is it just because the politics of it here, or do you know why they're more aggressive in that nature over there?
I think it's a culture. I think it's very much a culture issue. So, for example, if you were creating campaigns in the UK, you would have a set of restrictions. If you were creating campaigns in Southeast Asia, you have even more restrictions,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's just part of the culture of these different countries. In the United States, we're just, we're more wide open. We're just, yeah, let's go. Come on, let's do it. And different cultures are not quite as open as what you find here in the U.S.
And is that something you adjust to along the way? Because it always seems like
Oh, you have to.
there's like a new
Oh,
regulation passed like every week.
yes, you absolutely positively have to. That's part of the sophistication of marketing departments now is that they have to keep up with privacy policies and regulations. And then on top of that, depending on the industry that you're in, you may have another set of complicated regulations on top of that.
Mm. And I had like I mentioned, I had the pleasure of speaking to your partner, Jeff. And I didn't ask him this, but I want to ask you this. I always feel like partnerships are very much they're not even metaphorical marriages. They're literal marriages. It's sometimes, from what I understand, sometimes harder to get a business partner out than a spouse out of the picture. So how did you know Jeff was the one?
Oh, that is such a great question. I love this question. So, Jeff and I are very different people. And I'll tell you the funny story. Here's how I met Jeff. As I mentioned earlier, I bought Eloqua in 2004. I was customer number 12. And I had it in and I put it in. I integrated it with Salesforce. And about 5 weeks later, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Am I up? Am I down? Am I doing this right? So I called Mark Organ, who was then the CEO of Eloqua, and I said, Mark, I need some help. There's no benchmark data. I don't know if I'm doing is right, it's wrong. I need to talk to somebody. And he said, well, Deb, we've just hired a new head of services, consulting services, and I'll give you his name. And his name was Jeff Pedowitz, and he gave me his telephone number. Atlanta is a city of 6 million people, and Jeff and I lived in the same neighborhood.
What?
Yes.
This is
it's
turning
a large
into a
neighborhood.
rom-com, Debbie. What's going on here?
Wait, 6 million people. And so Jeff and I met, and he left Eloqua before I left corporate America, but he kept saying, come on, Deb, come on, Deb. A lot of times through the years, people have thought that we were married, especially when we were doing a lot of traveling and we would do things together, in the early days. And Jeff has a skill set that I don't have, and I have a skill set that Jeff doesn't have, right? Jeff is very good at sales. He's very good at running a company. He's very good at getting things done. I'm more of a visionary. My look at the market is always about 2, 3 years out. I mean, that's just how I see. And so we've just always been a great match. And I'll tell you another thing about Jeff. Jeff is Jewish, and I'm married to an Arab. No problems, and we have a great and respectful and wonderful working relationship.
Wow. Isn't it funny? So you mentioned something there, Debbie, about the fact that it is hard for people to comprehend that a male and female can be partners together without being something more, whether it's romantic or marriage, whatever you want to say it is. Isn't that funny? But if you were two guys, if you were Daryl Qaqish and
Yeah,
and Jeff
yeah,
Pedowitz,
it wouldn't be a problem.
no.
And I always explain people because sometimes our company, we're very family oriented in our company. Jeff and I both wanted to have a company. We had a no asshole policy. That is our policy. And so Jeff and I would describe our relationship more like a brother and a sister. And there have been times when we go at each other, like in front of other people, but it's like a brother and sister going at each other. But we have had to be very careful how we act in front of people because, like, oh my God, Jeff and Debbie's fighting. Oh my God, oh my God. And nothing could be further from the truth.
That's awesome. And how did that dynamic develop? That the fact that you guys can, take the gloves off and go at each other. Well, I mean, I'm assuming that took time, right, to get to that point?
It did. But I'll say that Jeff and I both are very strong individuals, have very strong visions for what should happen. And we are going to make sure that as partners that we're going to get our viewpoint across.
In terms of partnerships, when did you know that he was, I kind of joked that he was the one. At what point did you realize, oh, shoot, that we can be something? Was there something, is it something as simple as just like a feel?
The whole time I was working with Jeff while he was at Eloqua, because I was already thinking about leaving corporate America, I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And I remember Jeff and I were actually at a conference together. He had already left Eloqua, and I was still hanging on to corporate America. And he was talking about what he was doing. And I got to tell you, Joe, I was so excited about this space. I remember the very first time I saw a marketing automation demo, it was Eloqua. I remember the room. I remember the sales guy. I remember who was there. I was so blown away by the potential of this technology, how it would change marketing and how it would change sales. So when Jeff said, I want a company that does this, I'm like, I am all in. Let's go.
Wow. And you guys have been, I think, is it 16 years if memory serves correct?
Jeff and I met in 2004, and we started the company in 2007. Jeff started the company, I think, in July of that year, and I joined the company in October.
And what are we looking at now in revenue marketing? Like, is because from what I understand, it's just exploded during the lifespan of your company. Describe those early days and to what it looks like now.
So I'll give you an example. I've always done a lot of talking, a lot of speaking, a lot of writing. And in the early days, I would go around doing these little workshops, and I would have, 50, 60 people in a room. And I would say, raise your hand if you're responsible for revenue. And, I may get maybe one or two hands that go up. Any B2B marketing group that you talk to today, if you ask that question, just about every single hand in the room is going to go up. So that has been a big change. However, marketers still struggle to make a credible impact on revenue. When I did my dissertation, I got my dissertation, I think, in 2019. I got my doctorate in 2019. And it took me longer than usual to write my dissertation. It took me I probably worked on my dissertation for like 3 years. I don't know. I had a company to run,
Yeah, you're a little
things just
busy.
kind of get in the way. A
Yeah.
little busy. But my whole premise was marketing is drowning in enabling technology, yet only a third of B2B marketing organizations report financials that impact revenue and growth. And of that third, half are suspect. So the whole time I was getting my dissertation written, I was so afraid, Joe, that that gap would close. The gap did not close. The gap is still where it is today, as a matter of fact. Still, only about a third actually report up to the board or to the senior executives. Here's the impact that marketing made on revenue.
Debbie, you were sweet enough to say that I was not old enough to remember the early days of the internet, but that's very nice of you. I do. I had an AOL email address.
Oh my gosh. Okay, enough said.
Yeah, but I am old enough to remember when you couldn't quantify like marketing. Like there was no ROI, like there was no actual ROI on if something worked with marketing. How has that changed now in terms of you can't BS your way through marketing anymore? Because, like when you probably speak to a room full of marketers, it's like, yeah, we got this done and we've got this many clicks. But now all of a sudden you have all this data. How has that changed the game of marketing?
So, that's a great question, Joe, and it's the reason why I wrote my second book. My first book I published in 2013. It was called The Rise of the Revenue Marketer, and it was all about the early days of revenue marketing, as you and I have just been talking about. But this year I published my second book, and it's called From Backroom to Boardroom, Earn Your Seat with Strategic Marketing Operations. So here's the deal. If you take a look at a B2B CMO, and if you take a look at those B2B CMOs that are wildly successful in impacting growth and revenue, and those that are not successful in impacting growth and revenue, the secret sauce for the successful one is they have a strategic marketing ops organization. I frequently call marketing ops the CMO's mulligan. It's their second chance to get it right. It's because you can't take a bunch of right-brained people and say, go get analytical and go get technical and make sure everything's connected and we can report with credibility everything that's going on. You just can't do that. So the B2B CMO has had to drop back a little bit and say, okay, what's keeping me from being successful? So they've created this marketing operations organization that's very analytical, that's very technical, that takes a look at the numbers and ensures that the environment for the technology for the CMO to be successful in reporting and predicting revenue growth is in place with all the right dials and with all the right technologies and all the right data and all the right analysis. So again, if you take a look at any company, any B2B company in America right now, those CMOs that are reporting their impact on revenue and growth, and also forecasting what they'll do in the upcoming quarter. Those are organizations who have strategic marketing operations organizations as an integral part of their marketing organization.
Interesting. And Debbie, this is going to be like a weird question, but when it comes to B2B and B2C, What is the difference in mindset when you're selling? Because at the end of the day, you're selling something or marketing something. What kind of mindset do you have to sort of like, or what kind of hat do you have to throw on when you're a B2B or B2C?
That is a great question. And let me talk about what I call the gap. So, a few years back, certainly when I started doing this, there was a huge gap between how B2C marketing was run and how B2B marketing was run. B2C marketers, once they were able to create a website and people could go to that website and they could press a button and buy something instantly, you know, that's how B2C marketing was taking off. Amazon is a great example. Amazon is like the biggest marketplace in the world. Anything I want, I just go to Amazon, boom, boom. It comes to my house 3 days later, and I'm happy.
Except purses, Debbie.
Except for
We're
purses.
not buying.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But so that's a B2C experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for many years, marketers, until they became revenue marketers and until they really got the right secret sauce, which was that strategic marketing operations organization, struggle to have any kind of accountability. Now, especially post pandemic, we're seeing customers in B2B organizations have zero patience. If you're online and you're looking for something, and if you find it in one place and they want you to, my husband just did this last night. He said they want me to fill out a form. I'm not going to do it, and just go to somebody else where you can get the information, right? And so that gap between B2C, which is largely self-serve and instant gratification, and B2B, which is going to be a longer, much longer, more complex sales cycle, which does require people at some point, or maybe not, right? I'll give you another example. What is the car service where you can just buy a car online and they deliver it to you?
Oh, Carvana.
Yeah, so I could just sit here on I drove in my friend's car last week. I really liked it. And I can just go online, and I can buy a 25, 30, $40,000 car and just have it delivered to my house,
Hmm.
right? Now, that is still a B2C experience, but it gives you an idea that the B2B world, because as consumers, we're so accustomed to that instant gratification, even in the B2B world and sales and marketing, more and more customers want authority and control over what happens. And so, even for example, in my organization, we're looking for self-service models for our customers. We are a B2B services organization. We sell to large enterprise customers. And here we are trying to come up with some self-serve models because that is what customers are asking for. So that gap between the B2C experience and the B2B experience is definitely closing. It'll never be quite the same. A lot of times in enterprise sales, there are multiple people who need to be part of the buying decision. There are multiple, hoops that have to be jumped through. It'll never be exactly the same, but again, as consumers, because we're accustomed to that quick B2C experience, we look for that in every part of our lives, even B2B.
That's awesome. And you mentioned a couple books, and I'd like to ask people, why books? Why'd you feel like writing now multiple books was important to you?
Well, I've always thought that people needed to be educated. And I'm in a unique position to talk to so many people in the customer. And I have a front seat to everything that's happening in the industry. We do it with customers. I see it with people that aren't customers. I just have a unique view. And I wanted to share that. Rise of the Revenue Marketer is an award-winning book. And even though that book was published in 2013, it is still a basic Bible for many, many organizations. And so I'll tell you how this is the true story about from backroom to boardroom. So I go through cycles. I go through cycles where I'll publish a lot. So from 2017, 2016, 2018, I was publishing a lot about marketing operations because I saw this as an up and coming thing that was going on within the marketing organizations. And then I took those articles and it became the nucleus for a book. And when I wrote From Backroom to Boardroom, it all started at a conference. It was the Chief Martech conference that's put on by Scott Brinker. And I was speaking to probably about 200 marketing operations professionals were in the room. And I had begun to think about, I always think about how people are doing their jobs and what does it take for marketing to become, get them a seat and a voice at the table. So I told this audience, I said, how many people in the audience does your company consider you a button pusher or a tech geek? Had a lot of hands go up. And then when I said, that's wrong, you really should be considered strategic enablers. And when we had that very short dialogue with those 200 people, you would have thought I had reached into their chest and ripped out their hearts. The response was so visceral. After my talk, people come up to me, yes, that's how they think about us, and we could be doing so much more, but we're just blocked and they don't get it and they don't understand. And and I'd already been thinking about a book, but that just really sealed the deal for me. So I wanted to write a book for two reasons. Number one, as a CEO, your number one job, beyond your relationship to the market, is to ensure that you have the right mix and are applying resources in the best way to create the most shareholder value. So then you take a look at the CMO and you say, what is their job? Their job is exactly the same. Any executive in a company, it's all about shareholder value. So if you're keeping marketing to being the pens and mugs department and the make it pretty department and the event department, you need to be fired, because the technology that marketers have available to them to be revenue and growth contributors. And so I wanted to write the book, number one, to say, you marketing operations professionals, you are absolutely correct. You should not be treated this way, and there is a better way to do this. But second, and probably equally important, it's for the CMO. It's to look the CMO in the eye and say, look, dude, if you're just going to be the brand guy or the brand gal in communications, go get another job. There's a reason why CMOs have half the shelf life of any other senior executive in the organization, and that shelf life is getting shorter every single day. So this is to tell the CMO, look, you have some secret sauce here, and that secret sauce is having a strategic marketing operations organization that can knit all of this together for you, that can take these incredible technologies, that can give you access to the data, that can give you access to the insights, so you know your customers and you know how to work with the customers, and so that you can create revenue and growth for your organization. So that's how the book came to be.
And, talking about your leadership style, like you mentioned, you're sort of on the visionary founder side of the company. It's very much, to me, when I think about the Pedowitz Group, it's very much like a Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, where there's vision and then there's the technical expertise that Jeff brought to the table. But nowadays, Debbie, as you know, most people just want to be the Steve Jobs. They want to be the visionary person and then feel like everything else is just going to fall into place because I have this vision. So how do you marry those two things? Because obviously it's worked in the Pedowitz Group to amazing success, astronomical success. But you couldn't just do it with vision. You need the technical side of things.
Well, in the early days, that's why Jeff and I were a good pair. I was more that visionary, revenue marketing, giving a name to something that was going on, and Jeff was more on the technical side. And now, as an organization, we have, we just have super smart people that are what I call technology ninjas. There's too many technologies to be experts in all of them. So we definitely have people in our company who are experts in categories of companies. Sometimes the technology always forces a change, not sometimes, but sometimes technology can come in and help redefine and rethink how something is done. And I'm never going to be that deep dive technical person. I'm always going to be that how do you run an organization? How do you survive and thrive? It's always going to be at a leadership level for me. But in a marketing organization, I call these people purple unicorns because, especially in marketing ops, they have to know data, technology, they have to know marketing, they have to understand business. And so my entire first chapter of the book is about the leader that's required to run such a unique organization. And it's a great thing because great marketing ops organizations do great things for the organizations, but it's also sad. And the sadness comes between this huge gap between what's happened in the real world and how our young people are being taught in college. And I'll give you a story. So I teach one class a year at the College of William and Mary in the MBA program, and it's always around marketing. And I have a half a day to do a whole seminar, kind of thing that I do for the kids. And a few years ago, I began bringing leaders of marketing ops in to talk about what's happening in this marketing ops world. And one year I brought Dan Brown of Verint Systems, and Dan has he just if you look at marketing operations in the dictionary, you're probably going to have a picture of Dan Brown there. So we did a great presentation. You could tell that the class was excited about the potential. They'd never heard anything like this, ever. And so we get to the end, and one enterprising young man raises his hand, and he said, "Mr. Brown," he said, "that sounds like a very exciting career. How do I go to work for you? How do I get a job in this category?" And Dan looks at the entire room, and he says, "I wouldn't hire any of you." And you could have heard a pin drop. What he meant to say was it takes such a unique skill set to work in this type of environment. You can't just get some kid out of college and, they know how to do all of these things. And there is a huge gap between what's happening in our universities and what's happening in the real world to educate our kids.
Her name is Dr. Debbie Qaqish. She's the partner and chief strategy officer at the Pedowitz Group. Debbie, it's been such a joy chatting with you today. We didn't get a chance to talk about your obsession with TikTok, which maybe I'll give you time now to go do a quick TikTok video or something like that. But I appreciate the time you've given me today, and I wish you guys the best of luck over there at the Pedowitz Group.
Thank you so much, Joe. My pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine, and that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.